When a routine traffic stop turns into a career-defining moment, a police officer's worst assumptions collide with a truth he never saw coming. His target is the man who holds his future in his hands. The sun dipped low over Sacramento's grid of streets, casting long shadows across windshield glass and storefront signs. Eric Porter was winding down from a marathon of meetings, his navy blue sedan gliding through traffic with the hum of a tired machine. He adjusted the vents, letting the cool air brush his face, while soft jazz spilled from the speakers, cutting through the mental noise of the day. As he eased toward an intersection, the amber light blinked its final warning before turning red. He braked gently, only to be jolted by the sudden strobe of flashing blue and red behind him. A piercing siren followed. Eric checked the mirror with a furrowed brow, steering calmly to the side of the road. The patrol car rolled up close. Out came Officer Bradley Larson, mid-30s, square jaw, buzz cut, and the air of a man who'd grown comfortable with authority. The badge on his chest caught the sunlight like a warning flare. "License and registration," came the terse command, more habit than hostility, but sharp nonetheless. Eric offered both with composed precision, retrieving the papers from his glove box. There was a pause, a flicker in Larson's eyes that signaled he was already sizing him up. "You know why I pulled you over?" he asked, leaning just enough to fill the open window. "Not entirely," Eric replied, calm and collected. "You rolled through that light, didn't quite stop." The words didn't land with conviction. Eric gave a small nod. "I thought I hit the brakes in time, but if not, I understand." Larson didn't move. He stood there a moment too long, studying Eric like he was waiting for something to feel wrong. His body stiffened slightly, a shift from procedure to instinct. This wasn't just a traffic thing anymore, not for him. He glanced at the license. "You're new around here?" Eric gave a short breath. "Been living here since spring. It's on the ID." But Larson's eyes weren't on the text. They were on the man. His questions lost their routine rhythm, trailing into something colder. "Where are you headed in such a rush?" "Just home." Eric's voice never wavered, but something had changed. The space between them filled with invisible weight. Larson saw a threat, not a commuter. Eric felt the tension inching upward, but remained unmoved. What Larson mistook for docility was restraint. This was far from his first confrontation. Larson slowly folded the documents, slipped them into his vest pocket, like a man preparing to deliver a lesson. "Step out of the vehicle." The command dropped heavy, Eric's fingers tensed on the wheel, his face still. "Any particular reason, officer?" he asked evenly. Larson's lips almost curled, but didn't. "I need you out of the car." "Let's not make this difficult." The meaning behind the words didn't need explanation. Eric unlatched the door, stepped into the cooling air. Larson watched, eyes narrowing as Eric unfolded to his full height, slightly taller, broader in the shoulders, calm in a way that suggested experience, not fear. But Larson didn't yet know who he was really dealing with. His suit was clearly custom-fitted, and the spotless shine on his shoes said he paid attention to detail. But none of that seemed to register with Larson. The officer flicked his fingers toward the front of the vehicle. "Hands where I can see them." Eric moved smoothly, showing no rush, no hesitation. "Is there a reason behind this search, officer?" Larson's lip curled in a half-smile. "Just protocol. We've had a few situations around here. Gotta be cautious." Eric turned his head, eyes locking onto the officer's. "Situations involving guys in suits with clean records. Or is this stop about something else entirely?" The question sliced through the air, and for a moment, Larson's body tensed, his hand drifting instinctively toward his belt. "Watch your tone," he snapped, the warmth in his voice gone. "I'm just asking for clarity," Eric replied, his voice firm but even, not an ounce of challenge, only reason. It was the kind of calm that unnerved Larson more than any insult would have. He stepped in closer, squinting slightly. "You seem real familiar with how this works. Got something I should know about?" Eric waited a second before answering. "No, officer. I just think it's important to understand the reasons behind these encounters. You know, transparency." Larson scoffed but said nothing. He started pacing slowly near the hood of the car, trying to assert control he could feel. Slipping, This wasn't how stops like this usually went. There was no fumbling, no defensiveness, no fear, just stillness, control, and it was throwing him off. You sure seem sure of yourself, Larson muttered under his breath, like you've already seen how this ends. Eric didn't flinch. Confidence isn't what matters here. What matters is respect. Larson stopped walking. That hit something. His whole expression shifted from irritation to something more cornered, like he was being shown a reflection he didn't want to see. He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. For the first time, he seemed unsure. That silence charged the air between them, and Larson realized this moment wasn't bending in his favor, but instead of pulling back, he leaned in harder. Turn around, hands on the hood, need to check for weapons. The words came out sharper, more clipped. Eric raised an eyebrow. Weapons? He repeated with a dry tone, not mocking, but just enough to highlight the absurdity. Do I give off that impression? Larson's face stiffened. I'm not going to ask again. There was a pause, just long enough for Larson to wonder if he'd gone too far. Then Eric complied, turning and placing his palms flat on the warm metal of the hood. Larson approached, the scuff of his boots echoing louder than it should have. His hands moved quickly across Eric's body, too rough, too deliberate, lingering a beat too long in places that didn't need checking. It wasn't about safety. It was about power. But Eric didn't react. He didn't twitch. He didn't even blink. He absorbed it all like stone. You're clean, Larson finally muttered, stepping back like he'd lost a game he didn't know he was playing. Eric turned around, composed as ever. Naturally. Now, if you're done, I'm not finished, Larson barked, voice raised, words tripping over his frustration. You seem to know a little too much about this whole process. Care to explain why that is? Eric crossed his arms, posture relaxed, unbothered. Let's just say experience teaches you things. Larson narrowed his eyes. So what are you, some kind of lawyer? Eric smiled faintly, something like that. The vagueness struck a nerve. Larson stepped closer again, trying to reassert dominance with proximity. You think you're smarter than me, huh? Think you're gonna talk circles and walk away like nothing happened? Eric didn't back up an inch. I don't think anything, officer. I just know what fairness looks like. And right now I'm not seeing it. The words landed hard. Larson's jaw locked, the smirk gone, his ego bruised, his grip on the moment slipping further. He leaned in and said what he couldn't take back. Fairness. That what you think this is about? Guys like you always. He stopped himself abruptly, the words hanging heavy in the air, even though they never fully left his mouth. Eric's expression remained composed, but the subtle shift in his posture said everything. It was clear he had caught exactly what Larson had tried and failed to keep hidden. People like me, Eric repeated, his voice soft but charged with quiet power. Larson flinched slightly, as if realizing too late that he'd crossed a line he couldn't step back from. That's not what I meant, he muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced anymore. I think you did, Eric replied, and the calmness in his tone was no longer gentle. It was surgical, slicing through Larson's authority with precision. And I think you and I both know this stopped being about a traffic light a long time ago. Larson tried to speak, but the words stalled in his throat. For the first time, he looked unsure of what came next, like a man who just realized the ground beneath him was no longer solid. Then came the moment that would follow him for the rest of his career. Eric broke the silence, his voice steady and final. Officer, there's something you need to know about me. Larson's jaw clenched. I don't care who you are, he snapped. But there was a tremble in his voice that gave him away. Eric reached slowly into his inner pocket, the movement smooth and non-threatening. Just grabbing my badge, he said, watching Larson's hand twitch near his holster. No need to escalate, just watch. The silence between them stretched as Eric pulled out a black leather case and flipped it open, revealing a polished badge that gleamed in the dimming light. Eric Porter, he said, like he was introducing himself at a dinner party, head of Internal Affairs, Sacramento Division. Larson went still, his eyes flicked between the badge and Eric's unreadable face, searching for a crack, a lie, anything. But there was only truth, and the gravity of it hit him like a brick. Internal Affairs, Larson echoed, his voice cracking despite the effort to steady it. That's right, Eric said, cutting him off. My job is to monitor officer conduct, and make sure that the badge you wear stands for the values it was created to uphold. The color drained from Larson's face, his confident stance unraveling as reality caught up to him. He backed away slightly, his hand falling from his belt as if the responsibility it represented had suddenly become unbearable. Eric stepped forward, narrowing the distance. "Do you know what the most disturbing part of this encounter has been, Officer Larson?" he asked, voice cool but razor-sharp. Larson stayed silent, his eyes darting like a man caught in a trap he didn't know how to escape. "It's not just the racial profiling, though that's unacceptable. It's not the aggression or the baseless escalation. It's the fact that you did all of this without having the faintest idea who you were talking to. You assumed I was ignorant. You assumed I was powerless. You assumed wrong. Because I didn't fit whatever image you had of someone worthy of respect, you treated me like a threat. That's not just dangerous. It's a disgrace to the uniform." Larson's shoulders slumped as the full weight of Eric's words hit. He looked down at the badge again, as if hoping it would vanish. Eric took a step back, but his tone didn't soften. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to step back, hand me my documents, and think very carefully about your next move." Larson opened his mouth to protest, but stopped himself. Then Eric leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "And you're going to hear from me again, not as the man you stopped today, but as the one who decides whether you're still fit to wear that badge tomorrow." Larson's face reddened, and his hands trembled slightly as he pulled Eric's license and registration from his pocket. Eric took them silently, sliding them into his wallet. As he walked back to the driver's side door and gripped the handle, he paused. Turning one last time, he met Larson's gaze. "Remember this, Officer Larson," he said. "The badge doesn't make you better than the people you serve. It makes you accountable to them." With that, Eric stepped into his car, started the engine, and pulled away, leaving Larson standing in the orange haze of sunset, stripped of certainty and facing a future that suddenly looked very different. But for Eric, this was far from over. His next move would ripple through the entire department. The ride back to his apartment was quiet, the city drifting past his windows in silence, but Eric's thoughts were loud and sharp. The incident with Larson didn't stand out because it was rare. It stood out because it wasn't. He'd seen too many like it, and too often men like Larson walked away untouched. But not this time. This time, Eric wasn't just a witness. He had the authority to make sure it meant something. The following morning, as sunlight poured in through half-open blinds in his office at the Sacramento Internal Affairs Division, Eric sat with a manila folder open in front of him, Larson's file. The contents told a quiet story. Vague write-ups, informal complaints, unresolved accusations, nothing major on paper, but the pattern was unmistakable. Eric leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his lips, knowing what this really was, a symptom, not the disease. He wasn't interested in punishing a single officer and pretending the job was done. He wanted to shake the roots. A knock broke his concentration. Linda, his assistant, entered with a stack of paperwork. "Morning, Mr. Porter. I've got the misconduct summary for last month, and Chief Daniels wanted me to remind you about the department audit next Thursday." Eric nodded, taking the papers. "Thanks, Linda. Also set up a meeting with Chief Daniels this afternoon. There's something I need to bring to the table." She paused for a second, registering the weight behind his voice, then nodded and left. Eric returned to Larson's file, but his thoughts were no longer fixed on one officer. This wasn't just about bias or misconduct. It was about culture, who shapes it, who reinforces it, and who allows it to thrive unchallenged. That afternoon, Eric sat across from Chief Daniels in a quiet conference room. The chief, sharp-eyed and seasoned, listened as Eric recounted the traffic stop with a level tone, every detail laid bare. "I could have let it go," Eric said, "could have treated it like just another case of bad behavior, but that would have been a mistake. What Larson did wasn't an isolated lapse. It's a reflection of what we've been tolerating." Daniels exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Larson's name's been brought up before," he admitted, "but we've always addressed it internally, quietly." "And that's the problem," Eric replied. quiet doesn't solve anything. Quiet gives cover. We need to stop whispering about reform and start doing it. Daniels looked at him, the reality of the conversation settling in. What exactly are you suggesting? A full departmental review, Eric said without blinking. Not just personnel files, but retraining, rewriting protocols, rebuilding accountability from the ground up. If we don't clean our own house, we can't ask the community to trust that it's worth walking into. Daniels sat back, silent, and finally gave a slow nod. You're going to make waves with this. Good, Eric said. It's long overdue. What followed were weeks of intense work, roundtables, policy reviews, closed-door meetings, town halls with community members who had stories to share and scars to prove them. The Larson stop became the spark, but the fire that followed burned much deeper. At Larson's disciplinary hearing, Eric made no effort to hide his presence. He sat directly across from the officer, unwavering as Larson squirmed under the pressure of questioning. A suspension was handed down, but Eric knew the real victory wasn't measured by how hard Larson fell. It was in building a system that stopped the next one from rising unchecked. Months later, Eric stood at a podium in a packed community center, addressing a room filled with citizens, officers, city officials, and skeptics. He didn't talk about blame. He talked about responsibility, about changing the shape of a department that had grown too comfortable avoiding hard truths. Justice isn't just about catching criminals, he said, his voice carrying through the room. It's about how we wear the badge. It's about fairness. It's about dignity. It's about protecting everyone equally, not just those who look like us or talk like us. That's the badge I signed up for. That's the badge I believe in. And that's the badge we're building together. The applause came loud and it lasted, but Eric didn't bask in it. As he stepped down from the stage and scanned the crowd, he saw a mix of doubt and belief in their eyes, but they were listening. And for now, that was enough, because real change doesn't start with noise. It starts with one man standing still in front of the storm and refusing to move. If this story moved you, pass it on to someone who needs to hear it. Change begins with conversations that matter. For more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the power of standing up for what's right, make sure to subscribe to our channel.